and this is where it gets hard to communicate my story, because it's not like our lives are not fundamentally compartmentalized like we try to compartmentalize things, of course. So.
And if I help somebody else, that makes me feel less commodified than if I'm just helping myself get somewhere.
Whereas, like, real life, it doesn't have to have a point. Like, it just is.
Life is always a pursuit of something.
I don't know, the constructs of identity is really interesting, and it's uncomfortable to, like, confront head on. Mm-hmm. And that's basically what this is realizing that, like, I'm not myself.
But now you're doing, like, self-reflection on a moment of self-reflection.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about what I'm thinking about too much, because then I'm afraid my thinking might shape what I'm thinking. Is that?
Exactly.
So while I am dramatizing it, I'm trying not to dramatize it because I want it to be organic and natural.
It's also reflecting on, like, who I am now, like, really that different? Like, I'm not where I would have hoped I would be, like, a year from that experience, I guess. And, like, that realization is something that I've been trying to avoid. I'm
afraid that me telling my story about my struggle and my thoughts on nonprofits and stuff and questions will cause people to say, oh, well, it isn't worth it. It is meaningless. So I'm not going to try to be an activist or an altruist in any way anymore.
And also, like, for my students, like, if my students ever saw this, like, I do want to kind of be that, like, Professor Robot. I want to be that good example, and it's not that I feel like I can't be anymore, but it makes me a real person, like, regardless. And it's kind of a weird thought to think about. Ultimately, it's good, but initially, it's terrifying. Because like, you are vulnerable. Like, you open yourself up to the world.
Because takes courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I don't really see my life as, like, ironic. I have no problem, like, looking at my life from, like, a third-person perspective, I guess. And, like, that's just kind of how I view my life in general.
It's hard to be documenting yourself. Since you can't physically be outside yourself and videotape yourself, because I find myself wanting to do that a lot.
In a sense, that's kind of how I deal with things, is layering self-reflection.
You start to reflect. That's not always, like, just this bad thing. It's a waste of time. It's like that reflection can be good. That reflection can, like, help you realize what you're doing and why you're doing it and sort stuff out. Like,
it's basically like, just handing someone my journal, but with, like, notes in the margin of, like, here's how to read this.
I mean, everywhere that we go, everything that we do, we have to always consider the audience, even when we're writing papers and doing homework, like, who's our audience? I
feel like without this, like, the notes, there is no story. Like, identity construction is that, like, people tell you what they think of you and then you agree or you don't. It's a time where you get to decide, and, like, you get to be the person who's making those comments and, like, those calls, and then you, on top of that, can decide, yeah, I like that, or no, I don't.
I get lost in all those jobs and perspectives, and I didn't know where to go with it, and and it's always in those moments where I'm, like, reflecting on this sense of being so lost that, like, some sort of direction comes out of it.
So I don't know, it's interesting because you want to keep the integrity of, like, what the story is and, like, that vulnerability, and you want to be that authentic person. But the whole act of it is very inauthentic. Definitely.
And I've been very concerned about some of that, like we were just saying before, like, am I being authentic? Like, am I making this overly simple because I don't want to go into things, or am I making it overly simple so that people can understand it, or for time's sake, or, what am I doing here? What is my intention in this, in these choices?
It is, like, you're just watching yourself, like, tell the world who you are.
That it's the intention, right? Like, if people are going to care about whatever my point is, then it can't be superficial. Like, it has to be all of me.
Like, realize that you are this human being, and that it's not just some story that I created. Like, this literally happened. Like, this is me. This is my life. It's not some actor, reading off of a script, and, like, this isn't, some, like, unrealistic possibility. Like,
the idea of being the method actor who wants to glorify the struggle so that it is something that's more easily watchable, I guess.
Like, this is what happened. Like, this is me as a real person. You can't hide from this. Like, you can't run. It's in your face. Like, that is you. And it's, I don't know, it's weird to be put in those boxes and to be labeled as those things.
As I'm doing the project, of course I'm going to be thinking about it more because I'm trying to struggle with it.
I think of, life in general as sort of a performance, right? So
You can call me Lady Gaga or Britney Spears, whoever else it is, does crazy stuff just to get attention.
in some ways that's performing. In other ways it's just learning how to relate to people. And maybe that's a little bit of seeking some acceptance.
My project is going to be somewhat unresolved. It's like you step into a whole new dimension of existence. And it's hard to imagine not being there anymore.
It's mildly unsettling because you'd always like to think that you're in the right and you're where you'd like to be. But, I don't know, sometimes you're not.
I know the kind of person I want to be, and I know that the person that I want to be cares about all these things. So I'm doing all these things, I think, constructing myself to get there.